Namaste Friends, welcome back to the WebTechnology video learning series. We have started learning about JavaScript. We have gone through a couple of lessons, understood what is JavaScript, its place in the overall internet or web ecosystem as part of DHTML, and we have looked at the basic features of the language in terms of keywords, different literals, and so on and so forth. JavaScript, in that sense, is similar to most of the languages that you must have already learnt, at least at a fundamental level. Today, we will take a look at different conditional statements that allow you to make a decision inside the code. There are 4 conditional statements that are supported in JavaScript. The first one is a simple if, then if else, and then you have if else, and then finally there is a switch statement. These constructs, conditional statements or conditional constructs, are similar to what you would find in any other language. It's almost, there is no difference here. So we'll try to go through quickly. The first one is a simple if statement. You have the syntax on the left hand side and example on the right hand side. Imagine we are trying to build a story for somebody and then see, given their age, whether they are eligible for a COVID vaccine. That is the story we are building in our code. The if condition is obviously using the if keyword. The condition in the brackets on the left hand side must be evaluated to true for the code inside the flower brackets to get executed. If the condition is false, then the execution goes to after the closing flower bracket. So that is, the code between the two flower brackets is executed only when the condition or the expression in the parenthesis is evaluated to be true. Let's look at the example. Imagine you are not initializing the variable age to 25 as shown here, but let's say you are getting it from somewhere from user input. In line number 5, we have the if keyword followed by an expression. The expression says age is greater than or equal to 60. So if this is the first phase of vaccination, if you remember, all the senior citizens were given vaccine, so that's the thing that we are building in our code. If the age of the person is greater than or equal to 60, then we say he is eligible for COVID vaccine. Now, you should be getting familiar with the statement in line number 6. It says document.write, and then there is a string as passed as a parameter to that function. What does this do? We have not discussed this so far. We don't need to really understand too much about it. It is a helpful debug instrument, much like printf in C or cout in C++. This particular function, what it does is, it writes to the HTML file which is having the JavaScript. So after the execution of the statement, the HTML will have eligible for COVID vaccine as part of the HTML. So if you are to view the HTML in a browser, you would see the string in the browser, provided the age is greater than or equal to 60. In the example, obviously the age does not evaluate, the condition evaluates to false, but you get the point. The condition is age greater than or equal to 60. For line number 6 to get executed, the condition must be evaluated to true, and that is how the simple if statement is. Many a times we also require to say we also have some other things to do if the condition evaluates to false. JavaScript supports that using an if else statement. You can see the syntax on the left hand side. The if condition and the open and close flower brackets remains the same. However, we have an else keyword followed by another block of JavaScript statements. A block of JavaScript statements is essentially things that are contained, a set of statements that are contained within a opening flower bracket and closing flower bracket. These are sometimes called braces. Okay, so the way that it executes is, if the condition is evaluated to true, then the block of statements inside the if will get executed. If the condition is evaluated to false, then the block of statements in the else will get executed. So these are typically called the if block and the else block. Now let's look at the example. We have gone further. So we have gone from a place where the vaccine is available only for senior citizens. Now we are also looking at 45 plus people. So the if condition is altered to say, if the age is greater than or equal to 45, then we say they are eligible. Otherwise, this is new here, we are saying they are not eligible. So in both cases, we are doing something, essentially writing to the HTML. However, line number 6 is executed if the condition, which is age greater than or equal to 45, is evaluated to true, and line number 8 is executed if that condition is evaluated to false. This is an improvement. Now there may be more checks that we want to do, right? How do we do that? JavaScript supports that using a if else statement. Let's look at the syntax on the left hand side. Now there are two conditions, if condition 1, else, and then there also if condition 2, and then there is an else. So the first if block gets executed if condition 1 is true. If condition 1 is false and condition 2 is true, then the second if blocks gets executed, and if both conditions are false, the else block gets executed. You can see from the comments in terms of when each blocks gets executed. You can extend this by adding more ifs to the else. Let's look at the example. Here we are trying to say when the COVID vaccine is available. Now line number 5 says, if age is greater than or equal to 45, then the vaccine is in phase 1. If it is not so, then if age is greater than 18, then the COVID vaccine is in phase 2. And for all minors, the COVID vaccine is not yet available. So we have two different conditions that we are checking, and then there is a third part as well, which should get executed if both the conditions are false. I hope you are able to follow the explanation. Switch statement that we are looking at right now has its similar constructs in most of the programming languages. Here we are trying to replace a big if else kind of a long statement to something that is readable. Here what we do is, the expression is given as a in the parenthesis of the switch statement, and that expression is evaluated. And then if the value of the expression is value 1, then the first code block is executed. If the value of the expression is value 2, then the second code block is executed, and so on and so forth. Each of the values is given out as a case statement. The things with the case keyword are called case statements. There is a break keyword here as well. What does break do? Break is delineating for each of the code blocks. So once, let's say that the expression is evaluated to value 1, then the code block 1 is executed, and then the break statement causes the execution to come out of the switch statement. Likewise for value 2, so that only one block of code is executed. You should note here that even though we keep calling them as code blocks, there are no flower brackets here. That is how the switch statement is. Right from the case statement until we reach a break is a code block by itself. There is no necessity for a flower bracket. The default statement is also important. The default statement is executed if the expression does not evaluate to any of the values provided in the case statements. So then the default is executed. Now let's look at an example. We are trying to see, given somebody's qualification, whether the person is eligible for UPSC exams or not. If the qualification is intermediate, we say he is not eligible. If the qualification is degree, we say he is eligible. If the qualification is postgraduate or PG, then we say he is more than eligible. Then if in case the qualification is not any of the things that we know of, then we say it is unknown qualification. This example follows the syntax that is on the left hand side. Couple of things that are interesting here are, if you are familiar with C, then you will see that the qualification here is actually a string and not an integer. So in C, switch statements do not accept strings as a value that can be evaluated in a switch. It has to be a number. The JavaScript allows switch statements to be switch statements to have strings as a evaluating expression. So therefore the case statements can also have strings. So that is one thing. Second, you will see that line numbers 12 and 13, there are no different code blocks there. That is how the switch statement is. If there are case statements with that just follow on each other, that means that the code block is essentially common to both the case statements. And lastly, you will see that there is no break for the default case, because there is nothing else that needs to happen for it to get out of the switch statement. After the last statement, it anyway comes out of the switch. Therefore, there is no need for a break after the default case. Let's look at some of the important aspects of this switch again. The expression is evaluated only once and is compared with the values in each of the case statements. If there is no matching value found, the code block in the default block is executed. If the break statement is missing, execution continues to the next block automatically, like the case that we saw in line number 12 and 13. There is no break for the case statement in line number 12, and therefore execution continues to 13 and 14 and 15 until there is a break next. This is not a bug. This is essentially how it is designed. Sometimes we want the same code block for multiple case statements, and therefore we put it up this way. The break statement in the last code block is not necessary for the reasons we discussed already, because there is nothing to break away from. It anyway comes out of the switch statement. Notice here that we did not say that the break statement is not needed for the last block, is not needed for the default block. We said it is not needed for the last block. Why? Because the default is not needed to be the last block. It can be, for example, very first block in the switch statement, in which case we need to put a break there. Okay, so the last code block does not need a break statement. That's all we have for the logical or conditional statements that JavaScript has to offer. We looked at a simple if statement, an if else statement, and then multitude of ifs and elses, and then finally a switch statement. I'm sure you are familiar with these constructs because they are very similar to how it was there in other programming languages. I hope you enjoyed your lesson. We'll see each other in our next class. Thank you.